I played Tom Clancy's The Division back when it first came out in 2016 and had an overall blast through the main game. But as most people would agree with me, the end game was dog shit, with there only being two main ways to get the end game tier loot we wanted, either shooting incredibly bullet spongy enemies in incursions, or dealing with moderately bullet spongy enemies and other players in the Dark Zone. I was particularly annoyed with the latter at the time because the concept of the Dark Zone alone was really intriguing. Unfortunately, what it quickly turned into was a group of four min-maxed a-holes sitting on DZ1 Westgate and killing every newbie to walk into the Dark Zone, and then running up north to DZ6 to wait out the bounty on their heads and claim it for themselves. And so I stopped playing. I recently walked in on my brother restarting his character to play with some friends who wanted to try it out. And since the whole theme of the game seemed to echo current events in America, I figured this was a good time to get back into it. To my surprise, upon loading back into my old character, I saw that there were 3 new zones added to the Dark Zone, and an objective was waiting for me up in the highest one, DZ9. So, I decided I would make the trek north and record the whole journey as a bit of a memoir for myself, but also to use as a presentation for talking about the Division as a whole. So I guess that makes this a retrospective video on the Division. A quick explanation for the uninitiated. The Division is a third-person shooter released by Ubisoft in 2016, and the Dark Zone is the abandoned quarantine zone of Manhattan that holds the best loot in the game. As you go up through the Dark Zones, the enemies get harder and the loot gets better. However, because of the virus, loot here is generally contaminated and has to be extracted by helicopter to get cleaned up. This means the player must go to an extraction zone within the Dark Zone and call for extraction by a helicopter. However, other players can come along as they are alerted when this extraction is beginning and can attempt to kill you and steal the loot you were carrying for their own, going rogue in the process.
Transmissions jammed. Proximity coverage only. Backup activated. System rebooted.
Warning, now entering Dark Zone.
Re-entering the Dark Zone was quite the rush of nostalgia, and with the complete lack of other players nearby, it made for a relatively relaxing/creepy mood as I wandered the snow-covered streets. While I was testing my capabilities in DZ1 to see how I would fare, I picked up a bit of loot and headed to what used to be the hardest extraction point to do in DZ1, but again, with the lack of other players, the task was a lot simpler. And then guess what happened? I almost shot another player who I mistook for an enemy, and he almost shot me too. Luckily, we settled down fast enough not to go rogue on each other, and decided to party up. And that's how I loped Potatopatrol into my little journey, so thank you to him for helping me out with my excursion. Once we partied up, we wandered around DZ1 and 2 for a bit, killing enemies and collecting loot, just talking, hanging out. After just having cleared out a landmark, which is essentially just a purple location on the map that acts as a typical dungeon with a boss enemy, we headed for extraction. As we were sending off our loot, we saw that a supply drop event was happening soon, where a crate with uncontaminated loot would be with lots of enemies, but you wouldn't have to extract the stuff you got there if you managed to open the crate. We decided to give it a try and ran up to DZ2 to get it. We failed. We stuck around to clear out the remaining forces, even though the box was gone since it self-destructs if time runs out on the event. Afterwards, we were low on health and ammo and needed to get somewhere safe to restock. This is where I learned you could stealth past enemies if you are quiet enough. Once we were stocked back up, Potato and I finally decided to begin heading north for the journey. We did another extraction in DZ1 right quick since we picked up some more loot as well. I really miss the gunplay in this game. The weapons all feel and sound super satisfying to shoot for me personally, and I think it spoiled me too much since I always listen for guns in other games that sound like ones from the Division. I know they're not accurate to real life, but I personally love it. Combat feels great despite the sponginess of some enemies, but otherwise it works well. The cover-to-cover mechanic works great, the skills are fun and unique with a good amount of customization, and I am still in love with this game's UI. I think it's probably my favorite UI of any game I've ever played. To be perfectly honest, I crave that digital theme, the tracing lines and dots across the screen, the clean text and bars. It's just perfection. We finished the extraction and began to move north into DZ2. Another flashback hit me as we approached this, what looks like a frozen over library, as I remember many times encountering very tough, bulky boys here and getting slaughtered. So we took a hard left and headed for a safe room to restock and hang for a bit, since Potato had to go AFK briefly. The safe rooms are a nice blessing so that you don't have to run to the edge of the DZ to refill on ammo, and they also have some vendors that sell good stuff. The loot in the game is pretty fair, and the power gain is very consistent, I find. Potato was still gone, so I figured I would head out for a little bit and extract a little more loot I had obtained. I started making my way for a larger extraction area in DZ3 as one of Potato's friends, Redshoe, had joined us for a short bit and suggested heading there, but Potato got back in time and reminded me that that particular zone was one of the hardest to do, as it was very open and there were a lot of enemies. So we decided to rendezvous up in DZ4 at a different extraction point that I did know very well. I eventually caught up to them as they were under attack from some NPCs.
Warning. Agent on your team is down. Requires assistance.
The enemy groups in this game were pretty well designed and offer a good enough variety to keep them unique. From the prison escapees known as the Rikers to the Cleaners, a group of flame-wielding vigilantes who want to burn the virus away. They're all really interesting. We completed extraction in DZ4 and saw another supply drop taking place. We decided to try and do it, and we failed to get there in time. We took another short break in DZ5 at one of the entrance gates, and I got to take in the environment for just a little while. For 2016, this game still holds up extraordinarily well in the visuals department. The faces are kind of meh, but the actual world of the game looks so realistic, it's insane. I tend to joke that Ubisoft is a company with too many artists and not enough programmers, but I can let it slide here for once because this game is gorgeously creepy and gross. And the whole atmosphere of the game is fantastic as well. It really gives off that gritty, modern survival feel. The soundtrack is also nice. It has a very Blade Runner-esque mood to it. That whole synthwave kind of sound. Moving along, we checked out the subways and did some fighting down there for a bit before continuing on the journey. And speaking of creepy visuals, this is what we ran into upon entering DZ5. A group of JTF corpses hogtied and executed. These kind of horrific elements in the environment, the extra game logs, and the story overall was one of the things that really drew me in. I'm a sucker for the dark stuff, and one of my personal fears is pandemics, so giving me an action game in this kind of setting was really appetizing. I just wish that we were given more, as the main story itself, despite having fun missions and a good main game in general, was a bit sparse for depth, and I would have liked a little more lore. Going deeper into DZ5, another type of event started. The underground contamination levels began to rise. Over the game, you can increase the strength of your mask filter, and if you enter areas above your filter level, you will gradually bleed health because the virus is too strong there. Once the contamination levels in the Dark Zone begin to lower, though, you can head down and fight some tougher enemies in a slightly higher filter level than your mask can handle for some good loot. I had never done this event before, so Tato and I decided to take it on by camping near the exit stairs and running out to recover our health when we got low, and then running back down to fight the enemy when we were ready.
Hostiles detected below street level. Your objective has been updated. Warning. Readings indicate this area is contaminated. Leaving contaminated area.
In the end, we succeeded, with Tato only dying once. Running low on supplies again, and with Tato running from some heavily fortified LMB enemies, we took shelter in another nearby safe room and got ourselves ready. Unfortunately, the pathway to DZ6 I wanted to take was blocked by those same enemies, so that meant it was time for another fight. We cleared out a good amount of the enemy and made a run for it into DZ6. Running right through the hanging bodies of JTF members. Fuck, this place is dark. There were still some enemies on our tail, so we had to keep running. I told Tato I wanted to extract some loot before going into the new DZs because I didn't know their layouts, and there was one that I was familiar with nearby, so with extreme caution, we made our way over to the DZ6 extraction site.
Agent, we've started pushing further into the dark zone. We're unlocking the gates that lead north towards Central Park. I need you to get up there and do a little recon. Let me know what you see and stay safe. It's not exactly friendly territory.
We didn't want to waste ammo getting there because I knew that the extraction itself was going to be a bit of a fight.
Fire on target! Over there!
Ready to bring it on board.
But once again, we pulled through and got it done. And that was it. Now it was time to set foot in the new Dark Zone areas. Nothing would be familiar, and everything would be more dangerous. But I was determined to reach the DZ9 safe room and complete that side mission, and so we entered DZ7. Again, I tried to avoid fights as much as I could since I had no idea of enemy spawns or how tough they would be. DZ7 was heavily fortified and barricaded with a lot of military-level blockades, reminding me of the outskirts of DZ4. Difference was, I was worried we'd be bombarded with high-level LMB forces any minute, which made it much more nerve-wracking. And then there was another supply drop. We'd figured we'd try it, cause why not? The closest for us was in DZ8, so we snuck through this open plaza and entered the 8th Dark Zone. On the way there, between us and the drop, there was a safe room, so we restocked ammo and headed out to the other side of the building, which was really convenient. But it didn't go well. However, Tato was determined to kill the boss from the event, and we did manage to do that. Unfortunately, the enemies from the drop event and a couple of others were too aggroed on us to stop, so we decided to loop back through DZ7 and find another way into DZ8. Compared to DZ7 or even the rest of the city, DZ8 was actually relatively well kept. The cars were parked nicely, everything was kind of clean, there wasn't too much trash, but it was very quiet, very empty, very creepy. Since we had some loot on us, we decided to make one last extraction, even though we knew it might present a challenge. We took cover and prepared for the enemies to come. Tato eventually ran out of ammo, so he asked me to collect his loot and put it on the extraction hook to trade back to him later while he went to go get ammo. I just barely got the bag on in time before having to book it out myself.
Extraction operation complete.
Since he had already been up here before, Tato told me to meet him at a DZ entrance close to DZ9, so I was left to make my way there alone. Once I arrived, I gave Tato his loot and restocked myself. However, as we were doing this, my comrade noticed there was a manhunt taking place down in DZ2. Rogues. I was quite surprised that there were still people that went rogue in this game, or that there were even enough players for someone to go rogue with. But we decided that we'd head down and take a look, see if they were easy to fight, and then finish the voyage. And so, I went rogue to kill a rogue. Just this one time.
Rogue agent neutralized.
On the topic of going rogue though, the whole thing still isn't extremely balanced, since there's still way overpowered builds people do and then just camp the gates, but it was a good attempt. What's really funny though is that I went back on the day after I made this trip to DZ9 and had an absolute blast to the past when I saw another squad of rogues whose usernames I recognized from when I played this game in 2016. So the same people have been spawn killing noobs for 4 years? Holy shit, how can you not have anything better to do with yourselves? That aside, we headed back north after getting a few kills on some of the rogues and some nice rewards. Which meant it was time to enter DZ9. Bodies. Bodies and bodies and bodies and bodies filling dump trucks and streets. It was a bit unsettling, especially when there was a sign saying Relief Center ahead right at the entrance to the zone. This was a really grim area with no other players and what felt like little NPCs wandering about to fight, mostly cleaners. This area was a complete mess compared to what I had seen in DZ8 and worse than any other sector. But either way, I had made it. As we were looping around on our little tour and to end the journey and go to the safe room, you can guess what happened. Another supply drop. But we decided for old time's sake to give it one more go. And you know what? We made it. Somehow, I managed to sneak past the enemies because they weren't on top of the box for once, and was not shot when I tried to open it.
Supply drop claim. Updating coordinates.
We were both laughing so hard about this, and after that hearty chuckle, we reached the safe room.
No loss if you don't check the zone. Finders keepers, right? Next time, come ready to buy.
Look, there's no room. There's just no room anymore. The park is full. They can't keep up with the dying. The transport trucks are dumping bodies outside and headed back for more. Jesus, I've never seen so much death. They have to seal it off. No one should ever see this.
Not exactly scenic New York City, is it? But at least we got some idea what we're getting into. Thanks, Agent.
Well, that was a bit underwhelming. But either way, I was honestly happy to have made it here. It was a really nice way to come back to the game, especially for what was my favorite part of the game conceptually. And this whole video, this little marathon from DZ1 to DZ9, was a great time to reflect on my time with The Division. I own none of the DLC, and I'm unsure if I will ever purchase them, but what I can say is that I missed The Division. It was definitely something I needed a break from at the time, but coming back to it was quite the ride.